When it comes down to investing, you have to do your homework. And that's exactly what we're doing on this show. Because in this series, we're looking at the airline industry. And we're starting with some of the biggest airlines in the world. And the first one we're going to start with is American Airlines. Now, American Airlines is a major player in the airline industry. I mean, when you look at their total revenue, they made about $45 billion, which makes them one of the major players when it comes down to, I guess you say, the airline industry. And as typical fashion on the Business Talk Library, when we look at the homework, we start with what products do they have? Like, what problem is that product solving? So when we look at the very first one, the biggest part of any airline is going to be air travel, or I guess you say the target customer will be passengers. And the problem that they're solving is helping people get from one place to another. So transportation is a problem that they are solving. And then also because of they have unique partnerships with so many different airlines or so many different air carriers, what you'll often see is there are a lot of different names that will pop, or I guess they different brand names that will pop up in the American family. And then the second one is going to be the cargo. Now, if you're already flying from one place to another, I mean, it becomes, like I say, extra revenue to agree to transport different products or different. Now, it's not a major part of their business, but it is a part, and it helps them generate more revenue. And then the third part is an other category. Now, this one gets a little interesting because there's a lot of different things that can fall into other. But for American Airlines, the biggest part of that has to be their loyalty program. Now, if you're not familiar with airline companies, when you do the research and you realize that with an airline, the loyalty program is actually a pretty big deal. I mean, for American Airlines, their loyalty program is about almost $3 billion of revenue, which means it's a pretty big deal. And just, I guess you say, long story short, the way that it works is they create agreements with credit card companies or financial institutions to say, hey, we will allow you to use our brand name on your credit card. So when people use this credit card, they can get points that they can trade in for air miles or for air tickets or for different amenities once they get on the plane. And for that agreement, the credit card company gives them a portion of the revenue or a portion of the spend. So when you think about all of the products that they have and you think about the problems that they solve, the question is, how often are people having, I guess you say, a transportation issue? Like, how often are people needing to get from one place to another? And it is a very common problem that people are having. Now, with COVID-19, a lot of that has, drastically impacted it. But I would give them a B plus when it comes down to products. Now, in the next area, the piece that we want to look at are the financials. In a normal situation, the projected revenue is around $45 billion a year. But with everything going on with COVID-19, you're going to see a ton of fluctuation in the finances. So what we're going to look at is the last 4 quarters to just kind of see what was the trend before COVID and then kind of, hey, how are things looking now? So let's look at the financials. We look at the financials for American Airlines. One of the things that we definitely see, as I said, with COVID-19, the 2020 Q2 numbers look drastically different from the trend that they were at before. But in a normal situation, they were about a 22% gross margin, which means that, hey, they were someone managing their product costs, like the fuel cost or all of the costs of actually running a flight, to where they were managing it well. And then when you look at their operating profit, operating profits aren't going to be that high for airlines because airlines have to manage costs. They have to be more effective at managing costs because it is a very competitive industry, and everyone's looking for great deals on flights and so forth. So I would say their profits don't look deeply impressive, But the thing that I would say you have to pay even more attention to is the cash. Can the business generate enough cash to actually fund the operations? Because if they can't generate enough cash to fund the operations, then I would say that, you know what, this is probably an airline that may be in danger of actually struggling in the future. So when we look at what their trend was for their cash performance and their free cash flow, were they able to actually generate cash from their operations? What you see is even before COVID-19, that they were actually kind of trending downward prior to COVID-19, which isn't a great sign, because what that means is if you can't make enough cash from your operations or your free cash flow, that means you either have to go to a bank and borrow the money, or you're going to have to issue new types of debt, which is never a good thing for an airline that already has low margins. When I look at the financial side of their business, I would say I'm not very impressed by the profit margins, and I'm not very impressed by the trends of the cash flow. Because if you can't generate enough cash from your operations, it puts you at risk of having to actually go get a loan or having to take out more debt, which we know that many airlines have filed for bankruptcy because they had too much debt or they couldn't generate enough cash to stay alive. So when it comes down to American Airlines, my personal opinion, I would give them probably in the C range when it comes down to their finances. Now, when it comes down to your airlines, as I said before, a lot has been impacted when you think about COVID-19. So when it comes to just about any airline, their prices have dropped when it comes to the stock, because that's the part you want to pay attention to. Is you want to ask yourself, is there room for this stock to grow? And if you look at the current price, it's about around $11 a share. Now, the 52-week high, or I guess the highest it's been in the last 52 weeks, was about $31, which to me tells me that, hey, once we get through COVID-19 and we get back to, I guess, somewhat of a sense of normalcy, that there's a lot of room for this price to grow. So when it comes down to can you make money on the price of this stock, I think there's a lot of potential for you to make money on this stock when things start to go back to normal. But the big question you have to ask yourself is, does this company have the financial backing to be able to survive a COVID-19, to live to see that growth again? And as I said, American Airlines is one of the major airline in the industry. I mean, they $45 billion in revenue, and they seem to have enough cash that will allow them to make it through whatever or however long this tough time lasts to actually see the growth. So when it comes down to the growth or how you can make money on this stock, I would give American Airlines an A in that category. So there you have it. When we look at the product, they provide a product that a lot of people need. It does have some cyclical nature, but it's a product that a lot of people need. Now, when it comes down to their finances, I'm not overly impressed by their financial performance. But I will say when it comes to how you can make money on this stock, I will say there's a lot of room for growth there. So when I look at the overall score for American Airlines, I would have to say American Airlines is probably a B stock. When things go back to normal, I think there is some potential that you can make some profit on this type of